Joining me today to look through all those are Melanie Phillips, columnist at The Times and the editor of politics.co.uk, Ian Dunt. Nice to see you both. Melanie, what do you make of the rise of Lord Frost all the way to the cabinet table?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, it sounds a little unkind, perhaps, but I think he's probably one of the very few grown-ups in politics at the moment. He had a tremendous success in his negotiations with the EU over Brexit. It's been, obviously, as you've said, quite comical to see that he's had a number of potential roles which have disappeared as soon as he's been given them over the last few weeks. And I think that's probably because the Prime Minister has wanted to use him in a central position, but has been unable to shuffle the deck until now. Now, clearly, by appointing him to this position to be basically minister in charge of ongoing fights with the European Union, he has knocked out Michael Gove, who was in that kind of position until now. And so it's intriguing to know quite what will happen to Michael Gove from now on.
What do you think, Ian? He's also apparently going to take a bit of the Foreign Secretary's pie and be in charge of UK relations with the individual member states of the EU.
Yeah, I mean, which goes to show that Brexit isn't done, will never be done, and is now an ongoing role that really requires a person in cabinet. It's not just something that you can close the door on. Michael Gove, for all of his failures, actually would be getting on fairly well with the Europeans. He's quite polite. I think behind that politeness, there's a real sort of steely, cut-you-up disposition. But nevertheless, he's polite. And in most of those relationships, when it came especially to Ireland, he was quite effective at it. Now, these are some of the most contentious areas that we'll be dealing with. I suspect, I mean, I don't like the way Melanie says he's now in charge of having fights with the EU. I mean, this is your major trading partner, your major neighbour. You don't want the relationship defined by animosity. I suspect that with Frost, there will be more animosity there than there was previously, and that's what we're going to be looking at over the next few years.
He is, though, an unelected bureaucrat. We're just what we were supposed to be getting away from by leaving the
EU. Yeah, it's
well, indeed.
Now, Robert Zelick, very senior American official, has worked under various administrations. I was very interested by his article in the Financial Times because it seemed to me the first kind of detailed attempt by an influential American to try and look at how they could relate to Britain now that we've left the European Union. What did you make of it, Melanie?
Well, I took a rather dim view because I take a rather dim view, I'm afraid, of President Biden and his approach to world politics. I mean, is this man really going to be influential on Britain? I hope not. I mean, I hope he'll be an ally. But here's a man who has, just in the last couple of days, virtually dismissed the genocide of the Uyghurs in China as a matter of cultural differences. He gave a most remarkable interview in which he said, there are cultural differences, and President Xi and I agree on this. His thing is to do what he's doing with the Uyghurs, with Hong Kong, with Taiwan. My job as leader of America is to protest about it. I mean, what an extraordinary thing to say. And then you've got his whole pivoting, repositioning of America in the Middle East, which I think is terribly dangerous. He's basically pivoted away from the alliance with Saudi Arabia by a number of gestures he's made to show that Saudi Arabia is no longer the ally that it was in favor of Iran. Now, he has stacked his administration with Obama retreads who were behind the disastrous 2015 nuclear deal. And they seem to believe that by engaging with Iran, they can tame it. Surely recent history shows us this is absolutely foolish.
Robert Zelick really is talking more about the relationship with the UK. What did you make of that, Ian Dunt?
It's generous, but it's not going to take us very far. So, I mean, we have a major problem with the Biden administration in terms of how it relates to the Johnson administration. He remembers the comments that Boris Johnson, these kind of racially tinged comments that Boris Johnson made towards Barack Obama when he was vice president. They also view Brexit as part of a sort of Trumpist nationalist project, correctly in my view, that essentially pulls Britain out of Europe. Now, putting aside those politics, that has structural implications, which is that ultimately the Americans viewed Britain as the bridge into Europe, that it had a role in the US, it had a role in Europe, and that was how it operated. Now, Britain is no longer at that table in Europe. So strategically, it is simply of less use to Washington than it was before. There are still things that, of course, that will bring America and the US together and the UK together. But on that core functional strategic political relationship, this starts from a very, very dim stage.
And Melanie, just quickly, what Aditya Chakraborty touches on this. What did you make of Keir Starmer's message?
I think he's struggling. He's struggling to define himself as a leader of a party which he's struggling to define as different from the Conservative Party. And that's because I think over many years, Labour has kind of lost its way. If they want a new model, which I think actually the pandemic shows us that we actually need, I would suggest it's a model that should be based on social solidarity rather than our culture of rights and entitlements. That's a longer discussion, I'm sure.
What did you think, Ian?
It's actually pretty interesting. Look, it's policy light, but what you're really seeing is Labour positioning itself for the post-pandemic politics. Now, there is a division within Conservative Party and its supporters, especially in the Red Wall, on austerity, on that instinct for reining in spending once the pandemic is over. Now, on the Labour side, this for once actually puts in a position where it does not have those distinctions within it, where it does not have that combat within it. And it seemed to suggest that Keir Starmer, unlike Ed Miliband in 2010, is going to say that he's not going to support moves towards austerity, towards cutting public spending. So in terms of today, not very particularly newsworthy, policies weren't that impressive. In terms of what it tells us about the next 2 or 3 years, it's some pretty impressive strategic thinking from Keir Starmer, and also correct on its own terms.
Okay, thank you both very much. Very nice to hear from you.